All right, everyone. Welcome. Episode 32, right? 32, Talkin' Shop, Outlier Firefighters. I'm here with Jim Theobald of Wheeling, and super excited to have you. Uh, it's pretty cool. I've been trying to run into you unintentionally, and I was down at NIPSTA like sometime last year for another class. I took company fire officer for you, and I could not run
Oh,
into you
excellent.
to try to get you to come on here earlier. So I'm glad that we saw each other at the Al Schlick training. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, you guys are in for a treat, and Jim's awesome. So I really appreciate. Well, I'll stroke you a little bit. I really enjoyed my time in company officer, or COFO, or whatever. And it was really cool to have you speak. You're always down to earth and relatable for firemen. So I appreciate your teaching style for sure. So
Oh, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, Pete puts on a good class. I'm lucky he puts up with me and lets me come in and talk.
yeah, well, hey, you resonate with people, so it's a good thing. I,
Oh, yeah,
you know.
awesome.
So we'll get rolling right into the questions and kind of get touching with your intro to the fire service. So, what was your first exposure to the fire service?
So I'm a legacy, which kind of helped me out in one regards, where my dad was a fireman and had an uncle that was a volunteer fireman for Wheeling. So just as a little kid, especially because they had a little bit of a farm over there in town, and so whenever the guys would have fires, they'd go back to my dad's house, pop some beers, the typical fireman stuff, especially back in the day when, 3/4 boots and iron lungs and, you know, just the old school days. I remember my brother and I, like, we'd sneak up on, it was a detached garage we had, and then over by like the farm sheds, we'd kind of climb up on the roof and hear our dad swear and uncle swear because, you're a little kid and you're not used to that. So we thought it was cool, but just you'd hear the stories and, oh, that idiot screwed that up, and I can't believe he did that. And then, oh, he was good. And it was just that camaraderie was really, really cool to see. And, plus, too, it felt like we were part of some secret club, like my brother and I just kind of hiding on the roof looking at these guys talk about something, and you're like looking at them and you're like, wow, like that's kind of cool. And I never really thought much about the firefighting side of it as opposed to that camaraderie side, right? It was always in the back of my head like that was pretty cool. And then just as you're going through life, you're growing up, you're just taking a path, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I was trying to be a school teacher of all things. And on the other part of my life, things didn't quite work out that best way. And it was like, oh man, all of a sudden I'm married. I got two girls. I got to find a career. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, wait a minute. My dad was around a lot with the family. Like, bills were always paid, meals were always on the table. I'm like, he never once complained about work. I'm like, let me call him up. And so I was exposed to firefighting as a little kid, but I didn't really think about it from the age of probably 12 to 20, 22. And then all of a sudden it kind of started dawning on me like, wait a minute, like I'm listening to everybody complain about their jobs and hating life. And I'm like, I'm gonna give this a shot. So I called my dad. I'm like, hey dad, son Jim. And he's like, what do you want? And I'm like, hey, like the job, like, what do you think about it? And he's like, my dad doesn't ever talk to nobody. And he's just like, yep, it's good. And I'm like, well, that's gotta be something. So then I still realized, I'm like, why am I asking my dad? Like, I love my dad, but don't get me wrong. So I was like, let's start talking to some of his friends and like people, you call uncle, that it's not an uncle, but
Oh yeah.
you call him uncle out of respect. And they started telling me stuff. And I was like, all right, let's do this. I think this is going to be something really, really good. And then the coolest part about it is once I did do it, it was a lot easier to relate to my dad. And then some of the stuff you like were drilled into you as a kid starts making sense. And I started laughing, and it's like, it's the greatest job in the world. I mean, we get paid to be big kids that do dumb shit and have a great time doing it.
Amen.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a legacy too, man. And same thing. I didn't find it until probably I was 18 when I was lazy. Really, that's what it was. We had to do a research project my senior year of high school, and I was like, oh, I got to do interviews, and I was like, I'll just go down to a fire station. Like, I can talk to anyone there. I don't even have to try. And I got to ride along, and that was it.
Oh,
Like, I was in, and realized that that's probably what I should be doing. And it took me a little bit. I kind of drifted off. I was maybe going to go to culinary school, but I get to cook now, just like you get to
yeah.
teach now. It's the same thing, right? Like, you still find it. So it's always cool. I love talking to other legacy guys because it, I don't know, it's just beat
Yeah.
into you, but you don't realize it.
Right. That's the thing too. Like sometimes like that legacy it carries that bad connotation too, because you get a couple of these guys that come through and it's like they think they got their dad's time. And I'm like, man, like obviously you're the same way I am, where it's like, no, like I got, if anything, I got more to prove. Like I got to show, like, hey, I didn't get here because my dad. I got here because, yeah, my dad showed me the way. And believe me, it's like I wasn't, how do I say it? Like I hate the guys that talk about hitting grand slams when they're born on third base. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like I definitely had an advantage, no doubt about
sure,
it. Like
yeah,
getting out the job and having a dad and all of that, but I just had to work that much harder to show, like, hey, I also deserve to be here. I don't have my dad's time. I got to make my own way. Plus, I got to get rid of that shadow and be my own person, but still pay that homage and respect. Because, dude, the last thing any legacy ever wants is to have another firefighter tell their father, hey, your kid's a joke. Or, like, hey, he's not you. Or, like, what went wrong? Like, the apple, like, it didn't fall from the tree. It just never made it down. Like, what's
yeah.
wrong?
Even
So,
if they
yeah.
don't put pressure on you, like my dad didn't, even if they
Oh,
don't put that pressure, you're still like, I've got to live up to. And I have an uncle too, like so I got it from two
oh,
different departments, right? And
oh yeah.
yeah, it's funny, and you're totally right. Legacies are either like kind of like us, where we realize what it is and we try, like we never feel. It's like imposter syndrome, right? You're like, why am I here? But then there's the other
Absolutely.
where they're like a clone of their parent, and they think that their 30 years that their dad did is their 30 years, and it's like no, it's not. So
Oh, not even
it's
close.
funny. There's like no in between, at least in the legacies that I've met. But
Right on with you. I'll
yeah.
agree on that.
So I mean, awesome way to get interested and get into it. So where was your first was Wheeling your first apartment, or did you start part time somewhere first?
No, so Wheeling was the first. It was kind of crazy. So I was actually still teaching school, and I was like, I knew things were going because I was actually a professional fighter. So a lot of people knew that about me. But that and teaching the school wasn't going along. And back when you're stupid, you're 20, you're not thinking benefits and pensions and all this. And I'm like, oh, I'm making more money fighting than I am teaching. I thank God it worked out this way. I'm very happy. But it was one of those things where I was like, I gotta get rid of teaching, forget this, kind of go my own route, get that stable job. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, thinking like, what did my dad do to be home? So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start testing because I saw the writing on the wall. And so I took a consortium test. I don't even know if they do those anymore, but it was like one of those like 20 department tests. And I got so lucky because I'm telling you, I'm dumb. It's a big head, but a very little brain. I'm like an etch a sketch. I learn something and then I walk and my head bobbles and it goes away. And I'm like, just kills me. But this consortium test, they had a math section on it, and it was multiplying and dividing fractions. And the craziest thing was, I was teaching fifth grade at the time, and that was the math that I had to teach. So, like, I'm going against all these grown adults that are like far more qualified than me, but no grown adult remembers how to like multiply and divide fractions because it's just not needed. And here's me, like, yes, like I'm awesome. So I was able, like, by the grace of God, I scored high enough on this consortium test to like set me up. And so I got a high enough score. So that was great. And Wheeling was part of that consortium test. And so everything went through. And because of how they gave you points for certificates and that, some departments I was very high, some I was very low. But I was like, man, I got to start testing. And the problem was I got cocky. And this was like my first really humbling experience because I'm like, oh, look at me. I got a history degree. And I went to college and I'm teaching school. And I did really good on this first test. I believe it might have been Mundeline's test I took next, and I failed it. I completely bombed it. And I was like, oh, I'm not as smart as you think you are, idiot. Like, start paying attention and doing stuff. So I went on a tear of that 2 years of taking every test I could, any test I could. And the craziest thing is, like everybody says, you go to a million interviews, but back then it's not like it is today. Like, there's a couple hundred of us fighting for one spot, and you're lucky if you can even get an interview. And I was really fortunate to have some good friends of my dad that kind of took me under their wing. And Mr. Larson, Eric Larson, who's a former police commander, he's like, hey, idiot, do you know how to interview? And I was like, no idea. And so he's like, come work with me. And so it worked out perfect that I basically had 7 or 8 dress rehearsals before I came back to Wheeling. Because I was like, also my number gets called up. They call me in, and it was great where I actually felt I had the confidence, I had the practice, and it was like it was meant to be. Where I had so many dry runs with other departments that by the time I came to that interview, I felt like I aced the interview. And again, as much as the legacy can hurt, it also helps. They knew my last name, they knew my family's name, so that obviously had to set me up for a little bit of success. three openings were there, and me and two other guys like, come on, welcome to Wheeling. And I was like, all right. So that was my start with Wheeling, and I'm one of those loyal guys. I mean, I grew up in Wheeling as a little kid. I was loyal to Wheeling, and then first place that hired me, I'm like, I'm staying for life. Thank you for the job. I appreciate this because literally at the time I had two little girls at home and a wife, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I get sick time, I get benefits. Like, what is this stuff? Like, this is craziness. Like comparing it to the side jobs, it's like I get all the benefits of being a school teacher, but I get to be a big kid and have fun at the same time. And that was the writing on the wall. I fell in love with it.
Oh, it's awesome. And then, so how long were you a fireman? And then, what was your progression for promotion? Because you're a battalion chief now, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of crazy. Like, again, blessed. I think that's the best way to say it. So I was real fortunate. I got put on a shift that had some pretty good mentors. Like I really had like I would call legends on like the Wheeling Fire Department. Very senior guys, no nonsense. Like really kind of hold the line to you. Like Jimmy Jacobson, God rest his soul. He passed away, but Tim Johnson was there, and then I had a lieutenant initially that moved up, and then I was assigned to Joe DePong, a lieutenant, probably one of the best lieutenants in the suburbs. Just phenomenal guy, taught me how to be calm, how to like really know the job. And what I didn't realize at the time was these guys were teaching me how to really focus on the two most important things in the fire service, and that's fire behavior and building construction, long before it was ever cool to talk about it. These guys were kind of steering me in that direction, and I had a passion because they were teaching and learning and growing. And then like the blue shirts that I was working with were really good, and they would help me. And then all of a sudden, like we had a buyout happen, and it was crazy. So if you guys remember, the recession and down times, and I forget the years because, like I said, it's an Etch a Sketch bobblehead. I forget, but all of a sudden, the barn bosses and the legends and the guys that like you knew when you were with them, you were coming home. Poof, they're gone. They were given that offer that you couldn't refuse, and all of a sudden there's this huge void, and I'm like, holy crap! Like what happened? Like, because a typical suburban kid, I get out of the academy and I go to the ambulance, and I love the ambulance, which was kind of strange, but it was one of those new things to me. And we had a ton of fun, and we drove all over and just, being idiots. And it's like I'm going on a sidebar here, but it's kind of one of the funny things I talk about. When you think about the belly laughter stories, like when you're sitting at the firehouse table and we have that belly laughter, they're never fire engine stories. They're always ambulance stories.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to have great ambulance partners. Like Brett Oftedal, is great. He's down in Tinley Park now. He retired from Wheeling, great guy. But him and I mean, I would be in tears sometimes. Like just like who cries and laughing so hard at work? Like it was great. And so I was really enjoying my ambulance time, but again, I had those barn bosses constantly doing the fire training, holding you accountable, making things work. And like again, like great lieutenants that like really were there for me. And so when this power vacuum hit, all of a sudden it was like, whoa, what's going on? Like that's kind of scary. And a lot of these guys were like, Jimmy, take the test. You need to take the test. And I was like, I don't want to take the test. I'm loving being a blue shirt. And this was all around like the 5 to 7 year mark on the job somewhere. And they're like, you have to know how to study for this test. It's a test you've never seen before. And this time, because I was humbled, taking the fire department test, I'm like, I'm going to believe you and trust you. So I took the test, didn't really, study hard or do anything. And, I didn't do good on the written. Obviously, didn't study, but like kind of learning how to take the test. But I did it really well on the assessment. I scored number one. And it really turned a lot of heads. And they're looking at me like, well, how'd you do that? I go, well, what do you mean? I was me. I took all the knowledge of all these great people that surrounded me, and I just did what they told me to do. Like you take their influences, and it's like I was surrounded by greatness. So how could I can't let them down. I can't be a screw up. Their good stuff's going to rub off on me because just I didn't have a choice. Like, you know what I mean? Like they would never allow me to be a, POS or someone who sits in a corner and complains. So I was like, all right. And next thing you know, I'm like, okay. So then they go through the next lieutenant's test. And when it was time to take that, I was ready and I scored well. So about the 10-year mark, I got promoted. And then that's when the panic set in. And I'm like, oh boy, I bought the ticket. It's my turn to cash. Like, I got to do something now.
Yeah.
And that was really cool because I had some really bad bosses and some really good bosses. And it was cool because the bad bosses taught you what not to do. And I still made a lot of mistakes. I made a ton. And but I had some really good bosses and some people to admire myself to and like really try to be like, hey, like I want to be like this guy. Like these are people that give a shit. And I was really, really fortunate that I started taking classes like crazy, like any class I could take. Um, and I rubbed some people the wrong way, and I feel bad about that now, like looking back. But I was all about learning because I'm like, man, like it was the running joke, but like, when you're driving the engine, you don't know what to do. What do? You look right. Like, hey, boss. And all of a sudden, I'm that guy in that right seat. I'm going, oh, and I was really fortunate that I had a great lieutenant who's now another battalion chief, Mark Menzel. And he had a lot of experience up north and just a great guy. But again, he cared. He cares about like everything. And so when I was his actor, he would call me all the time, like, hey, how's it going? Things going good? You're learning? It was great. But I also, and it's kind of a contentious point between us, but I think it's great. I like stole all the fires. For some reason, our battalion chief would be off on every fire. So Mark would move up to that battalion chief as the acting officer, and then I would move up to the acting lieutenant spot. And we were catching it to the point where everybody knew that when the battalion took off, we were catching a fire. And so I really got a lot of experience. But then through also taking all those classes, I started meeting people from all over. Like Keith Battle, a lot of people know him from Harvey. Like great guy, really took some time out of his life and really shared a lot of opportunities and experiences with me and kind of exposed me to that Mavis 24, Mavis 20, like, the fireman's firemen, the guys that are putting out fires all the time, going to work. And I met a lot of great people through them, like Chief Kurzik, Lieutenant Kurzik, like from Posen. I mean, a lot of just great guys that they spend wealth with me. And yeah, sometimes they'd bust my chops being a northerner kid or whatever, but I was able to learn a ton. But then even through them, they'd be like, hey, did you take this class? Hey, did you take this class? And then it was great. And then I started to learn too that like that core group of instructors that kind of teach for IFSI or teach for Romeoville or teach for NIPSTA. I started making friends with those guys and they would recommend good classes. And when you have an instructor who's telling you to take a class, I listen because like if that guy's telling me who teaches classes that that's a good class to take. So it was like a crazy, I call it my catch-up years of 4 years where it was just nonstop school, nonstop ride time. Anybody that would take a dumb kid and let him ride with them, I was doing it. I was going all over the place. I was really fortunate to meet Cliff Gardner as a squad five, then retired, teaches at NIPSA now, still just a brilliant genius, but the most humblest man in the world. And he spent a lot of time like, hey, Jimmy, like do this, do that. And I was just blessed. Like that's the best way to say it, to find the right people so that when that second lieutenant's test came around for me, I aced it. It was just no problem. And then it was okay. Now I'm super scared. So keep getting those classes going, do everything you can. And then I had a lot of great opportunities. Ken Korber, who's a retired battalion from Deerfield, he was big with the NIPSA thing. I took some classes with him and he's like, hey, kid, come out here and let's start working with this. And I kept building. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden I'm like surrounded by legends and geniuses and the best of the best in the fire service. And like you're going into these, seminars and day things and like you're listening to these guys talk about somebody and you're like, wait a minute, I actually know that guy. I sat with that guy, ate lunch with that guy. And it was really awesome. And so then when the battalion chief position opened up a few years ago, I wasn't going to take it because I was having a lot of fun on the engine. And I had two unbelievable guys that I was assigned with. I was very lucky in the suburbs where a lot of times we have to rotate people and we don't get that core group. But I have a guy, Jeff Goulash, and I brag about him to the point where he's uncomfortable about it, but I would say he's the best engineer in the world because all he did was drive. And he was unbelievable at it. I mean, he would be 10 moves ahead of everybody on the fire ground from ladders, lighting, hose. Like, guy's a legend. Just awesome. And then I had Big Dave Cafferkey, who's now a lieutenant, well deserved. But I'm telling you, that guy could take a 2.5 inch hose through his teeth, carry two people out, and go through six walls. Like he actually, they came up with it. They called it the 3-ply toilet paper. And I mean, like, it's a family show, whatever. But I'm telling you, I never got shit on me. Like these guys were 3-ply. Like they protected me. We got stuff done. Like great calls. Things always went great. Even the guys that hated us, and unfortunately, there's sometimes happens in the fire service. They all still respected these guys. They were like, yeah, they're good. Like, yeah, we hate them, but they're good. And that was really cool. But I started looking at it too. I'm like, well, man, Dave's going to get promoted. Jeff's going to retire. like what change am I making? Like, yeah, I had a really good company, but am I making the world a better place? Am I making the town a better place? And so I'm like, you know what? I'll start teaching more. And I started teaching with all these awesome chiefs. And all of a sudden I'm like, man, like I look at how like these guys are influencing the young people and like some of the stuff that I hated, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, if I'm a battalion chief, I can change that. Like I can get rid of busy work because I hate busy work. I think that's the oh God, I hate busy work. And I was like, yeah, let's give this a shot. And so there was a good pool of candidates, and I was just blessed. Like I say I had the right resume at the right time for what was needed. I definitely was not better than the other two candidates. I can tell you that for sure. And it's not just like coming up here and like, oh, I'm just a humble guy. No, really, those other two guys, top of the food chain, great guys. But I think what they were looking for, I had, and it was really awesome. And I got the nod, and I got moved up, and so it went really well. And then I was fortunate that they kept me on my same shift for about a year. So it was great. So I had two awesome lieutenants, unbelievable guys. I worked with them. They were great. Eric Sturbins, Jason McCauley. Jason ended up retiring very shortly after. But I mean, you want to talk about like firemen's firemen, men's men. Like these guys were great. They could, and it worked. It was awesome. And then when they moved shifts on me, they sent me to a new shift, and I'm like, oh man, like you know how it can be. They all open arms. These guys were great. They were absolutely great. They totally receptive to like the Kool-Aid I was drinking, and they taught me a lot. I was like, hey, this is how we like. I'm like, man, that's awesome. That's smart, and it worked out really well. And it's not all roses and rainbows and unicorns
Yeah.
farting glitter, and it's not that. I mean, believe me, those guys, motherfucker. Oh shit, sorry, they'll crack on me in a heartbeat. They'll be like that fucking idiot, but they're awesome guys, and they brought me in, and it's been great since. It's trying every day, just trying to make the world a little bit better place, and they're about it. I mean, it's good. So it seems like it's gone crazy fast because like I'm basically just right around the 20-year mark, and it's like, man, I'm a battalion already. Like, what in the world? But I still love it. It's still going good.
That's awesome. Yeah. Uh, it seems like developing people, right? Like, and being there for the
Yes.
people and teaching, like that usually comes with the territory for either promotion or opportunities, right? I mean, you're talking about meeting all sorts of people. I usually don't share too much about my own personal, but whatever. Like I started up north on the border at Antioch. I started up there, and we were fortunate enough where we burned like a decent amount. Like I was definitely good for enough fires every year, and I think you're just not hungry because you're getting fed all the time. And so we did a lot of training locally. We did a lot of stuff like that, but I didn't really get outside of that other than some certification classes until later in my career. Now I wish like I could have went years back. I could have went to nozzle forward and some of those other things, right? But I wasn't. I took it for granted because I was learning on the job so frequently that, and I didn't meet any of those people. So I'm in my 14th year in the fire service, 6 of which is full time, and like only now in the last couple years I'm starting to meet and network with people in that greater world, if you will, right? That who all think the same, and it kind of came out of necessity because where I work now, we don't really go to a lot of fires. We don't. It's that's just not what it is, right? And it's interesting to hear, you talk about networking and finding people through classes. It's the absolute truth, and not just my story or your story. You could get 100 firemen that would come up and talk about that and say the exact same thing, which only proves why going. Even if you were getting fed, even if you are going to Job Town every day, you need to get out and go to classes. You're so totally spot on with that.
Yeah, it is crazy. Like the funniest thing too that I've always kind of realized is it's made me laugh, but we always kind of made the jokes about like you're a dumbass in your department, but the second you cross the border, you're a genius. And like that kind of really like resonated with me a little bit where I was like, yeah, like man, sometimes my own guys bust my nuts pretty hard, but like I'm selling out or we're having great times and like CEQs are going good and like this group. And I started thinking, I'm like, but sometimes I do the same thing. Like, I got some really genius guys. I'm talking some of the best guys in my department. And I'm looking at them like, wait a minute. Like, I need to shut up for a second, bring them in the office and just talk to them. It's so funny. Like I got like our apparatus group over in Wheeling is unbelievable. I mean, you're talking like Jason Curtin, Rick White, Chris Riley, like Brian Meisner, like guys that really know this stuff. And I'm like, why in the hell would I go to FDIC and take a class on this apparatus before I even talk to these guys and suck up their knowledge? And so that's been one of the things too. Like I've been trying to work with guys a little bit as I see like keep going to classes, go everywhere you can, but also talk to the people in your department. People are passionate about different things. And it's amazing, like for every awesome, for every Cliff Gardner out there, like, you know what I'm saying? Like every like, like just millions of guys like Kelly Burns. And like you talk to these guys, they also started in a small world too. And if you could get them in the small world, it's great. And yeah, it's definitely pretty cool, like as you learn. But I know what you're saying too, like at Jobtown where when you're being fed, it's awesome. And sometimes that's where they can also build that complacency I've seen. And a couple of the biggest, coolest things I've ever seen is we've got some really great guys that I've been able to meet from the city of Chicago primarily that they are the job town. They're the squad guys. And, I love the banter and the jokes that go back and forth. And I sit there, but I love the fact that the good ones, like Conley Shirley, I'll pick him out. I just saw him today at graduation. Unbelievable guy. Been part of, I mean, just this brief, couple of months, he's been part of 3 Maydays, like working with guys and like making differences and like talking to squad guys and his bosses. His boss literally runs the Rid Under Fire down south. And I'll talk to this guy and he comes into teaching, he's passionate, but he's just as passionate about learning. And I'm like, man, for a guy that sees as much as he sees, and then like there's like Orion Rich and like Lieutenant Pack's laid up right now. He's hurt. But these guys are like, hey, like they're just as much about as learning as they are teaching. And I'm like, that that's what this job is about. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And shout out to O and Meisinger. So both those guys I was fortunate enough to work with in
Oh
up
yeah.
north. And Orion, my age, and him and I worked on shift with him a lot. He was a company officer, and so was I. And it was always a good time. And Meisinger was actually one of my first lieutenants that I ever went to
Okay, awesome.
really anything with. And he was one of the first people that really told me like, hey, it's okay to like be a nerd about the job. Like it was
Yes.
early on. So both those guys, it's cool that
Oh,
we
it's
have
great.
those
Just
connections
don't
too.
mention Orion though. Me to Orion right now. He's a little mad at me.
Oh
He's got
no!
he's got all the neck tattoos and
Yeah, yeah.
everything. And so we're all joking around and we're over at the academy, like just laughing. And the cops are doing their training at the same time. And we had a female instructor, I won't use her name, but she goes walking by. And of course, guys are guys. And I'm like, oh, really? And they're like, hey, what's her story? So I just lied. I just flat out lied. I'm like, oh, she's got a wife. She's totally straight as an arrow, but I'm not going to, I got to protect her. And they're like, oh, damn. And then they see Rich walking by. And they're like, what's his story? Because he's got all the neck tattoos and the face stuff and all this. And then Frisky, I don't know if you guys know Frisky, Mike Agostinelli, he's a truck guy in the city, great, phenomenal guy. He's unfortunately laid up, but they're walking by and they're all tatted up and everything. And I don't know what it was, but I got a hair in my ass. And I'm like, hey, you heard about that like work release program for prisoners, right? For the wildland firefighting? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, Rich just got released. He's like our local, like, work release guy. He's a hardened criminal. And these guys are mean mugging him the whole day. Like every time he walks by, they're eyeballing him. He comes in the room. He's like, what the is with these guys? And so, Greg Swanson, he's laughing. We're all laughing. Like, Jimmy told him you're a prisoner, like work release. He was like, that's not cool, man. That's not cool. And, Rich, like, he doesn't ever, like,
No.
he's calm, like so
Yeah,
calm. He's just like, that's not cool, man.
that's
So, but it's
awesome.
good. All right. They're good guys.
Yeah, it's a good group that works there for sure. I enjoyed. I'm actually going to be there at VMT again.
Oh,
Another
awesome.
class. I'm going to be there in November. So
Very cool.
yeah. So I would assume you picked up culture and values, kind of like we talked about in the beginning, from growing up around the fire station. Your father, some of the guys that were connected with him growing up, right? So. What better way to learn about what firemen are supposed to be than right legacy
Yes.
or that kind of thing. So I want to roll into some of these questions specific to you. You already said you bought the ticket, so that to me that was your key phrase the whole time I was in Kofo, And it's true. And could you elaborate? You kind of already hinted on it, but what that really means, like you bought the ticket, and maybe some situations where it's time to realize that you're the company officer and you got to do something.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like it's one thing. Like it's just again, it's awesome. Like just like great people around you telling you all the time, and like Kenny Duraz. Like I don't really like he wouldn't even he'd like Jimmy who, but he was a guy that influenced me too quite a bit. Like Greg Swan, Kevin Swanson, like these guys. We see like they were big on like you bought the ticket, and it's like yeah, I bought the ticket. Like nobody made me be an officer. I wanted to be an officer. So here's the question: why did I want to be an officer? Did I want to get off the ambulance? And like that's bullshit because we all took the same test and it said firefighter paramedic. It didn't say firefighter. And if I'm just trying to get off the ambulance, that means I want to give my so-called brothers and sisters that I'm so tight with more work so I can hide from it. Bullshit. Like I'm taking this to make it better. And it's like, and it's not like though to put the guys first, but it does put the guys first. It's to make the mission. Like, what's the mission? Take care of the people. And if you take care of the guys can take care of the people even better. And so I really started looking at that and I'm like, all right, I bought this ticket, which means first and foremost, I bring them home. I have to bring them home. I don't care what, we have to bring them home. And when you read, and I'm really big on reading these line of duty death reports, maybe to the point where I need some therapy on it. I don't know. But it was all these mistakes that were made. Fuck me if I don't learn from them. Like these people paid the ultimate price to teach me a lesson that if I can learn these lessons, I can then make the world a better place for my guys, for the people that, I can work with or influence because I don't have time to make all these mistakes myself. There's just not enough time to learn from all like I can't make all the mistakes, but if I can learn from everybody else's and then share all my mistakes with people, we can be better. And so it was one of those things where I bought this ticket. I'm going to bring everybody home. Well, how do I bring everybody home? I got to know building construction and fire behavior. Chief Scott XO, that's his stamp, like that's it. And it's like, okay, awesome. And then I can keep building from that and moving on. And it started to really help me out because it's like, if my engineer doesn't know where they're going, I need to know where I'm going. And that got me thinking. I'm like, wait a minute. How many like streets are in a town? And you really start thinking about it. Like I like, okay, how many streets are actually really in Wheeling? How many streets are actually in Lake Zurich? How many? And I start doing the math, and I'm like, man, there's only a few hundred, like 300. Well, I work 110 days a year with time off and all that other stuff. If I memorized one street a day, in 3 years, I know my town. Now, obviously, we're not going to be perfect and all that other stuff, but at least when I hear that street, I know which direction I'm going, and I can buy myself some time to get my flippity floppity phone or the grid book. But I can start being better. And then I'm like, man, like how many buildings in this town scare me? Well, wait a minute. Okay, what can I do to make them safer? Well, I can pre-plan them. Then I can pre-fire plan them. I can really get on board on this. All right. Well, you know what? 40 buildings. I do what? 10 a year? 4 years, I've got them all. And all of a sudden I started realizing this is the way to go. So I got into like pre-plans and that kind of stuff. And then those guys start following, drinking the Kool-Aid. And it was one of those things where I'm like, because here's the problem. I remembered being a pipeman a couple times and working for that officer who had that paralysis by analysis, where I'm looking at him going like, what do we do? And I've had a couple close calls, like nothing like to be in the movies and write a book about, but shit, when you look back, you're like, oh, Jimmy, what were you doing? Like, firefighter Brian Zerzo and I was relatively new. We had a paralysis by analysis officer. We got sent to do a task, and basically, we almost killed ourselves being stupid on a search and like for no reason. And the best part was I almost fell in a pool, and I don't know how to swim. So do you know how bad it would have been? Fireman drowns in pool in his turnout gear, like idiot. And so I started realizing like I can't be that officer. Like I have to have answers or know where to go. And that's when I came up with those cheat books I talk about all the time. And like, okay, I'm going to have the ability to find the answers. And then I'm going to find the smartest people I can, surround myself with them. And so when I don't know the answer, I can look left, I can look right. And now I can be there for my guys because there is no excuse not to learn as an officer. There just isn't. And I don't know if you guys have the problem by you. We have the problem by us where guys get made and all of a sudden they start dropping everything. They're not part of committees anymore. And they're not part of this. And it's like, you just got a pay bump. Like, you got a pay bump and you're not on the ambulance anymore. So 80% of the work you're not even doing anymore. The 20% to keep these guys safe, follow the three strategic priorities and take care of the fires and the real scary stuff, you should be awesome at. There's no excuse not to be because you chose to this route. You have opportunities to learn your buildings, learn your streets, learn the target hazards, understand the fire behavior, go to classes, talk to the greats, and let's do it. And that's just kind of how I am. Like, you bought that ticket. And if you don't want that ticket, what are you going to do when something happens? And I'm not even saying a line of duty death. Hopefully, we never see him again. But what about that where you don't size up that staircase and you're taking out, the same lady we've taken out for the 17th time for a ho-ho overdose or whatever it is, and the cot comes through, they fall through, and now they're laid up, or they can't walk their kids down the aisle. And that's the kind of stuff that just kills me inside. Or like, I mean, we both see the officers, they can't put their mask on. They can't, like, where's my gloves? Where's my pants? Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is our job. And so that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, I would almost rather be hated. I know nobody wants to be hated. Believe me, I don't want to be hated. I wish I was loved and, hugs, free hugs.
Yeah.
But I would rather be hated, but being like, man, he always kept us safe, got us in, and taught us well, than be like the most well-liked guy, but literally have like sending guys into buildings that don't have a clue. And so that was really my big thing on, like, when you buy that ticket, you bought it to bring them home and do everything in your power to bring them home. And that doesn't mean playing video games. It means reading the next, line of duty death, learning from the near misses, going to classes. And unfortunately, not everybody thinks like me or you or anybody else. So I just pour as much Kool-Aid as I can. Hopefully some guys drink it and don't throw it back at me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you're totally. I mean, we run jump companies, so like you don't get off the ambulance, but you don't write reports anymore. So it's kind of the same idea. They're still going on the calls, but yeah, I see it, and it's not like I've just seen it in my own organization. You see it all over it where they get made and then they're just done with everything, and like that's why'd you even get involved in the first place then, And there's a point, right? Like you have a shelf life in anything where you should pass to the next generation for sure. But the second you get promoted is probably not the time to get off of three committees and a special team, right? Like it's you know.
Oh, absolutely.
So obviously you teach, so you're into training, and outside of outside training, I phrase that horribly, but whatever. Shift training. What's your mentality towards shift training, and how do you feel it should be conducted, and who drives it?
That's awesome. So that's kind of crazy. Like, and it varies. And this is what's so bad. Like, I don't have a real straight answer. So I believe that it should be driven basically from the chief itself. The highest ranking member of the department should be like, hey guys, we have a right. Like, and I got a brand new chief. I haven't even really sat down with the guy, but from everything I hear, he's great. And I've been really lucky to have Chief McGrill and Chief McIsaac for him. But like, Chief McGrill was really great about this with me, and we really clicked on some things where, hey, the first thing first is the guys got to be here to work, and are they good? Take care of your people. Like, if they just lost a family member, they've got issues, we got to take care of them because they can't take care of nobody else. But when you get there, make sure your people are good. Make sure that rig is good. It's ready to respond to take care of what they got to take care of. Then after that, get better. Make one thing in your job life better. And that's awesome. Because, I mean, let's face it, nobody is down on calls. Nobody. And some of these towns, we are getting smoked. Like, we're talking 1,200 to 1,500 call jumps. And when you divide that in a year, you're going, holy cow. Hospitals, they're closing. ERs, now next thing you know, transport times are longer. So the workday is designed to pretty much screw the guys up. So I think that as long as we have the theory that there's an expectation that your job is I don't say your job, but your role in this job, your role in this organization is to get better every day, regardless of how you do it. I think that's the win. And so that comes down from the top. I believe it's the battalion chief's job to find the weaknesses in a shift. You're the one that's sitting back at the 360 view. You're the one that can see your officers. How are they doing? How are your engineers doing? How are your nozzle people, and everything else? And you see when the ladder goes bad. The lieutenant that's inside the building making the push doesn't see that secondary means of egress being thrown. He just knows it's being thrown. You look at that and you're like, oh, okay, ladders. Then you sit there, you talk to those company officers, and the training, I think, really needs to be driven on the company officer level because I think that's where that expectation is that it's not about, you know, you. It's actually more about me. And it's not saying that in regards to saying like it's a selfishness for that company officer, but it's like your job directly affects me. So if you don't throw that ladder, I don't get out. And here's the thing I always talk about. I think you might remember from the COFO. I always sit there and say, everybody in your head, let's picture a two-story bedroom house. You know, two-story, typical bedrooms upstairs, kitchen downstairs. And I ask everybody, I'm like, all right, in your head, picture a rip-roaring kitchen fire, suckers sailing. You pull up in that front yard. There's no door to that upstairs. We know where that fire's going. It's going upstairs. And that lady looks at the front yard, tears on her face, and she says, my 3-year-old son is in that bedroom right now, asleep in bed. You're going to be in harm's way. Who's going to get that kid? And all of us, hands up. Yes, we got this shit. 100%, because that's what we're here for. Every one of us is like, we're going. Yes, we know there's no line. Yes, we know there's no water. But you know what? We are doing this. But then I asked that question, okay, who's willing to just send me? And now some of the hands are like, well, I don't really like them, but like, you know, it's that hesitant because we are all willing to put our lives on the line to save it because that's what we signed up for. But then when we look and sit there and say, I can't be responsible for getting somebody else hurt. And that's where I think at the company level, when you're doing that training and you set those objectives, people really understand that if I'm not doing my job correctly, it affects somebody else. Somebody else can get hurt. Somebody else can go wrong when I'm at that company level because that's that intimate level. That's that first name basis, 100%. You know, hey, Jimmy, I saw your wife the other night at the grocery store. She said you're dumb as shit. Oh, yeah, you know, volleyball. And like you're laughing, but you're throwing the ladders, but you're not throwing that ladder just to be like, hey, I can throw the ladder. You're throwing that ladder saying, hey, guys, I will have this ladder for you. You know, or hey, we're pulling lines. And I also think, too, is you can be critical of each other with no pride and ego where it's like, dude, that's your hose lay. And it's cool. But like if I'm the battalion chief and I'm sitting outside and I look at that and go, dude, guys are going to take it personal. Ego's going to be involved. It's going to feel like a boss. But on that company level, it's just friends doing what? Being big kids, no different than wrestling in the backyard, hitting baseballs, shooting hoops, laughing, having a good time, feeling safe to make mistakes and be okay. And so that's where I really think the majority of company training, or most of, I'm sorry, training needs to be is at that company level. But I believe that it needs to be kind of directed from the very top in terms of training is expected to improve every day. And I think the battalion or the captain, depending on your rank structure, is the one who sits there and says, hey, I'm seeing a deficiency here. So can we get to work over there? And then also, though, where I think, and sometimes I fail at, and I work at being better, is that battalion or that captain who's ever steering has to make sure that they're providing their guys the resources to achieve that training. So if it is, let's say, ladder training, am I finding you a building in a place where you can go throw ladders? And more importantly, am I making sure you have enough time to not only throw those ladders, but to be able to respond to all your calls, still get some rest, still make sure you got food in the belly, the rigs are all good, because the last thing these guys need to do is run 6 calls in the morning, have no time, no break, no food, no meals. Rigs aren't even checked really the way they should be. And then I'm telling you, you go throw ladders. All that's going to do is get you the big middle finger. And it's not. So it's like, find the time, set things up right. And again, I wish I'd be like, oh, I'm perfect at it. I'm not. I'm terrible. Like it's still sometimes, I think the biggest disconnect when it comes to training is that we as higher end officers forget what it's like at the bottom. And what I mean by that is we don't forget. I remember when I got hired, I was hired with nothing. I didn't have a CPR card. So I rode backstep for a year and a half while they sent me to EMTB, paramedic school, and all this. I took a pipeman spot for over a year and a half. Well, I'm like, man, I'm going to pay these guys back. And I rode that ambulance 3 years straight, no time off. Oh, yay, Jim, so great. No, crap, because here was the problem. We were running, I think, maybe 30,000 calls, 3,200 calls a year. Not very many compared to what these guys are running now. I had Holy Family Hospital, not there anymore, 10-minute drive. I had paper reports. I had SOPs that were like super thin. Like being on that ambulance, was it the best? No, I mean, fighting fires is the best, let's face it, but it wasn't bad. Well, now my ambulance guys, they're well over 5,000 calls. There is no Holy Family. They're going to Glenbrook or Northwest, much longer transport times. they have these MDC computer reports that they want more information, like then it's in the encyclopedia. Like, I mean, they want like basically, fingerprints. They got to go through all this. Then they got to get these new drugs that I can't even pronounce. I don't even know what they're used for. And it's an insane amount. So for me to sit there and say, oh, I rode the ambulance too, just suck it up and throw these ladders. Uh-uh. What they are going through is way worse than what I ever went through. And I think sometimes there's that disconnect. And then where's the priority? And it's like, well, the priority should be training. No, the priority is making the guys better because it makes the town safer. So I go back to the mission. The number one mission is respond to the call safely, get the job done, do the best you can. If my guys are so beat up and worn out that they can't do that job, the ladders doesn't matter. And so it's one of those things where that's where it comes my job to sit there and say, okay, today's a busy day. We're going to take 5. We're going to switch this up. I want you guys to watch these videos, 5-minute video on some ladder throws. And then let's see if on Saturday we free up. Go ahead and give me 3 or 4 throws. Cool. And I think that's kind of where that open communication has to come from. And that comes from, I think, along with the training of you got to have that one guy you can trust. And let's face it, we have some firemen that they like to take the shortcuts. They're the video gamers. There's nothing we can do about that. So when they say something, it's coming from a me. I want someone that I can trust who's going to come from a we. And I had that. I've had really good guys. Again, I mean, same meal, Jason Curtin, Jeff Gould, guys that could be like, hey, Jimmy, can we maybe skip training, push it to 3:00 so the guys can get a nap? They got killed today. Thanks. That's not selfishness. That's a guy who's thinking about the we. And I'm an asshole if I don't realize that and say, you're right, 1,000%. And then I think, too, then the guys will do more. Because here's the one thing that I do talk about where training can go bad is that name one firefighter that will ever say no or that they need help. You don't. Every time, and that's why I always talk about that, like you can't put guys in positions to fail. If, it'd be like, all right, guys, we got a semi on its side. It's trapped somebody. I need 37 of you to get on here and pick it up. I'm going to have 60 volunteers. Like, it's just how it is. It doesn't matter if you all got 3 hernias, slip discs, and 2 broken arms. That's what you're going to do. And so I can't ask a question like that. I can't put guys in a position where I'm going to be like, hey, I know you're all tired, but you still feel like throwing some ladders? Because ain't nobody going to say, oh, no, we're tired. They're going to be like, give it. Let's bring it. Like, I got a guy, Frank Urbanus, I work with. I mean, he'd show up dead tired, every broken limb, and he's going to carry the truck itself over there to do the job. And it's like, I can't do that to them. And I look at these Chiefs and I'm like, man, like, we got to set these guys up always for success. And like, don't put them in that spot. And I always talk about that. In order to ask for help, you also need to accept help. And I see it a lot of times, like on shift changes where you get that early call, guys are like, no, I'll take it. Because they don't want to be that guy that owes. Because we're firefighters, we're alphas. We don't owe. People like owe us. But then that next person who needs that relief isn't going to take it because they couldn't give it. And that's where I talk about sometimes too, where it's not a cultural change so much, but just more of is all we have is each other. And everything we do in this world is designed to kill us. I hate to say that, but like nobody ever calls a firehouse and they're like, hey, I did something really smart and I'm healthy and feel great. Can you come over? Like it doesn't exist. And so all we have is each other and we're all criminally staffed. I love that. That's a captain mentioned right off the get-go. We're criminally staffed. Nobody's like, hey, I got tons of manpower. Would you like some? So all we really do is have each other. And to make 30 years, we need to be able to have that conversation. We're like, hey, Alex, I don't have it today. Like, it's hurting, man. Like, can I drive? Hey, no problem. Like, or, it's a time where, hey, my kid's going downstate to wrestle. I really don't want to be exhausted. Can you take the box for me tonight and I'll get you back the next day? Like, if we're willing to ask and give help, it just goes a little bit better where it'd be nice to see that a little bit more, that cooperation. But then on the other side of that, sometimes you get those people who take advantage, those takers. And, like we call like, the sheep, the sheepdogs and the wolves. And there's a few wolves out there. And that comes down to good barn bosses and, whatnot. But sorry, I went on a major tangent here, but it kind of all goes back to that training where I think that if guys are always open and honest saying, hey, I want to be better, which I don't think anybody ever comes to work says, I hope I suck today. I hope I am literally the YouTube video of the guy doing something dumb. Like nobody ever thinks that. But if we can sit there and have that mindset, so that everybody knows deep down, hey, we do want to be better. Just now is not the right idea to go throw the banger. Like today's a video day, or today's a tabletop discussion. I think that would go a long way. But that's kind of my thoughts on training.
No, I agree. If missing one ladder training means that you're going to be horrible at ladders, well, then there's a bigger problem, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean that. So I agree with you. Like, you have to be able to pivot for some of those days where you just get creamed, but it doesn't mean you don't learn, right? And I know everybody craps on videos and stuff like that because we're doers and we want to be physical, and I get it. But you can learn a lot from a video. And quite frankly, like the younger generation, like they don't get to see as much. We've grown as as an industry where industry is a horrible word, but like even like our training fires, like because some people got blown up, we had to fix some of that stuff, which is a good thing. I'm not but um, those days where the stoker has a little bit of kerosene in a water bottle and is throwing roof shingles into the barrel when no one's paying attention, they don't exist anymore. So visually, like people in the next generation are missing things until they're really in it, and the only way to really get around that is people got helmet cams all the time and stuff like that now. Yeah, we're not going to burn like Stockton, but you could go take a little trip to Stockton and go on YouTube and see what it's like on the inside. So I'm with you. Like shifting sometimes to those video trainings is a good thing once in a while, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. We can embrace that to a certain extent. And yeah, like you were saying too, with it's one thing, and we see it all over the place, right? And I believe it's a Bible verse, and I apologize if I don't know, but the send me has become like a phrase I think we've all been using, and you kind of said it in your own way of, well, it's send them once you become a company officer, like you're kind of volunteering someone else to go, and
That is a Keith Freeman line, 1000%. He's a Harvey fireman. Unbelievable. Is that whom shall I send? Send me. Like that's
yeah,
his. That is him as 1000%. I love it that you said that.
but then it's really once you put some plungers up there, it's send them. I can't imagine you in the car, like you're just basically saying, yeah, go ahead and do a search,
Yeah,
and then you just sit there like
it's yeah.
hopefully nothing bad happens. But obviously, like you were getting into, like that's where the training and really paying attention. I liked your 360, right? Like, and breaking it down from the top to bottom. I don't think I've ever heard it explained in that way. And yeah, all about it for sure. Training's obviously really important, but the way it's done is really what's
Oh,
the most important. So building construction, total way pivot. Which, by the way, you said you've been going off on tangents.
yeah, sorry.
That's what this show is. So
It's,
it's all
so,
about rabbit holes and tangents for sure. So don't ever feel bad about that. Like let it rip. Yeah.
appreciate it.
I just get to sit here and listen to you talk, which is even better. So
Oh,
I'm
no,
all
I
about
just
it. So um, changes in building construction, right, have really changed the way that we approach fire. Same with furnishings and some of those things. Do you feel like tactics have caught up to those changes in building construction, or do you feel like there's room to go?
so I think the tactics are caught up, but it's the application across the board is where we still need to keep like catching up, if you will. And it's just such a rough thing. So I like, for instance, again, like I'm telling you, like it's a disease with me because I always felt like there was a clock ticking in my head, something bad happening. So like when I was taking all those classes and going everywhere, I applied for a job at Mega Development. A former friend of mine, Tim Durkin, was a lieutenant in Wheeling forever. He hooked me up with this guy, and I started working commercial, worked my way up from just basically maintenance guy to or superintendent and project manager, and I started building these huge commercial buildings and really learning about that side of things because the residential side, yeah, I was building homes and remodeling and being a wood butcher here and apprenticing myself out to some plumbers and some electricians, being real close. So I thought I knew enough to get myself killed. Let's put it that way. And then, but I kept growing. But I'm like, let me keep learning this. And as I really started truly understanding like how we're building shit, it kind of starts telling you how it comes apart. And I really started seeing gaps, huge gaps in like the knowledge base of what this stuff is. Like I would be sitting there and I could ask questions like, "Hey, what's this made of?" And they're like, "Oh, that's stone or that's stucco," and I'm like, "That's highly flammable ephes. That is literally foam with an eighth-inch coat of mortar bed on it. Like if a bug farts, it's gonna knock that shit off and it's gonna light up." And like people will look at me and they'd be like, "No, you're wrong," and I'm like, "No, I'm not because that's the store I built. I built it. Like I'm giving you the pre-plan of it. Like I'm helping you out." And the thing was like, if I came up to any firefighter in the world and I'm like, "Hey, how would you put out a flaming wall of styrofoam?" They all know the right tactic. We're going to stand back. We're going to put a hose on. We're going to spray it out. The problem is they don't know that's what that wall is. And then I'm really big, and you remember, like I'm huge on that bag and can, where it's been, where it's at, where it's going, because that dictates everything. And unfortunately, I think the disconnect is between the two. Like I got Chief XO, Scott XO, guy, him and Bronco. You talk about like mentors of mentors, and these are two things like they are constantly on it, like just surfing all the time to make us better and more knowledgeable on it. But like what I always try to talk about is we have the tactics when we know what it is. It's like one of those things. It's kind of the funny, like the Jones and Bartlett test. You pull up on a building under construction. All windows and doors are blocked. There's no life hazard. What type of fire? A, offensive. B, defense. Like, yeah, defensive. We know. But the thing is, you don't know when you're pulling up to it because you're not seeing it. And that's the thing that always kind of makes me a little bit nervous about this building construction is that, yeah, a guy sees, he reads about it, TJI. Well, here's my next question. How many guys do you work with in the fire service set a truss? How many of them saw a truss loaded? How many of them seen these things get racked off the truck and then we're putting them together? Like my boss used to lose his mind, but I forced every single gusset plate to get two roofing nails in it. And he's like, "You know how much money you're costing me in time?" But I was always about the firefighters. I'm like, "Ain't nobody dying in one of my buildings." Like, if I built it, like I got to do a little bit better. And so I think a lot of guys get a good understanding, but the comparison to it. So the actual tactics out there, I think, are there. It's the strategies that I think about. And I think it's that bird's eye view of the outsider looking in that isn't really, I think that's where the work needs to come in. And you can tell, like right now, you have certain communities. Like I talked to a couple of firemen from Cicero the other day, and I love those guys. You talk about hard chargers, like we do this and we kill everybody, we make it happen, and like we're no weakness here, and like like you love that, like kill it all, bring it all, gonna do it all, like it's 100% like go go go. And you know what I'm saying? Like they are the epitome of that stupid bumper sticker, like saving babies, impressing ladies, like. And I'm not busting them guys; those guys are
No,
awesome.
yeah.
But the thing is, they're talking about like when we cut a hole in a roof, we're cutting a true 2 by 12 rafter. Where I mean, like dude, we could gouge this thing. We got all day, and like that's really cool. And those guys, they get comfortable. It's like Harvey guys, I talked to them, like they got in. But the problem is the stuff burns in the communities that have money. They're rebuilding with the lightweight, and now the key is from the outside they look the same, and that's where I start to like really start to see differences and changes. Is that in like my town, for instance, I have a lot of 60s, 70s construction. That's great, but I have a lot of 2000, 2010, 2020 construction, and they're not the same. And you know what? All my guys have tactics for both sides. They know how to do it. But the problem is at 3 in the morning when the tones come out and they get set in that building, which mode are they going to? And I think that's where we need to improve the training and catch up on is that the realization of where it's been, where it's at, where it's going differs on the conditions of what this was built with.
Yeah.
And that's where I tend to be like, okay, we got to catch up. And it's one of those things where it's kind of funny, but like we all have a clock in our heads and we all kind of understand it. But that clock kind of goes away when you've got that lady in the front yard yelling, like, "Hey, my husband's still in there," or he went back in for the dog. And now you're going, okay, risk profiles, but are you basing the risk profile off of what file in your head? The fire you had in the 1960s home, the fire you had in the 1910 home, or the fire you had in the 2020 home? And that's where it's one of those things where I do believe that as like command side of things, we need to be checking in with our frontline officers or that division or that group and really be like, are you seeing exactly what I'm seeing? And this is one thing I do. Like, I am quick to push blame. If you fuck up, I own you as an officer. Like, but the thing I'm also always try to make sure I do is when I'm watching a video, like I got a camera set up in my van and I watch that, I always have to check myself first and go, I am 190 feet back. I'm 200 feet back. I've got a clear view of the entire thing. That officer I have, that outside company, that chief, whoever it is, has a 15-foot view. They are severely limited by what they see. So whose fault is it? It's mine. I'm not communicating with them what this picture is telling me. And that's one of those things where it's like, I think a lot of bosses are real quick to point fingers at the wrong person. It should be pointing at themselves. Because if you saw it, you need to communicate it. And that's one of those things I look at. So when I do go to this building construction, I really focus a lot on Project Failsafe because of the commercial side. And I recommend everybody to look on that. It's a great resource. But the biggest thing that I learned, hey, it's on, how you doing? Sorry, boy, just walked in the house. But one of the biggest things that I look at to do when I do this, I'm like, a sprinklered building is designed to kill us. And that's the one thing I try to like really stress to everybody is that once a building is sprinklered, it falls under the assumption that the sprinklers work and put the fire out. So all my ratings drop. I don't need extra 2-hour ratings here. I don't need fire closing doors here. I don't need all this stuff. Yet, how many times in a given shift have you gone and taken an alarm out of service, closed the valve, done something? The second we do that, that building becomes super dangerous. It's designed to kill us. And that's what I was talking about. People are like, what do you mean? I go, think about this. I designed a building that has no fire protection. What did I just do? I built the shirtwaist factory fire. I built it out. Like all these major fires, the Lady Vans, like all this stuff that happened in our past, we're recreating. The difference though is that we put sprinklers in there. So it says, hey, it's okay to have these stairwells, 250 feet apart versus 75 because the whole building's sprinklered. But when the sprinkler system's down, what did I do? I just drastically increased all our, increased the danger and the risk. And so I always look at it like this is like, as we keep getting these buildings, we have to really truly kind of take that deep dive into the tactics with the different scenarios that we come across. So when these guys are flipping the Rolodex, they know the tactics. We know when to do outside. We know when to do defensive. We know when to do transitional, offensive, whatever the new term of the day is. We know how to isolate. This might be, okay, someone's upstairs. Get up there. Don't bring them down because you know the fire's going to catch up to you. Close the door. Call for the vent, the under search, or just the ladder to the window to bring that victim out. Like we have all these tactics and options, but the key is which buildings can we apply them to? And I think a lot of that's going to come from those first officers talking with that outside chief and having that plan sitting there saying like, and I got great officers. I got Vito and Chris. They're awesome. My whole department's awesome, but I got great guys that we have that talk. Like, I mean, we know that talk. We know our town. We know our stills. We train. We add to it. But it's one of those where they'll call it, hey, Chief Lightweight. Okay. They're thinking like I'm thinking. I just hit that clock button, and they're going to work and they're talking to one another and they're evaluating and okay, we're doing good. They changed their tactics for this versus, hey, we're an old school Wheeling. Everything's built like a bomb-proof, bunker. Man, hey, you know what? Never mind. Call the other guys up. Hold off. Don't put that fire out. These guys come to practice.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of things. So I really think that we're like tactically. I think everybody has the tactics. They know like there's no new nozzle. There's no new hose lead. There's no new ladder throw that's going to fix the process. It's the strategy to employ those tactics. I think that we still need to work on and how to apply them to what type of building we're facing because it breaks my heart. I mean, we had a screw up not that long ago where we were pulling 1 3/4 into commercial buildings on a major commercial building fire. And it was one of those we stopped and it's like, okay, we got to talk about this. Why did we make this mistake? And we made the mistake because we didn't talk. Like the commanders, chiefs, like it happens because we always go back. I call it that law of primacy. You go back to the first thing you learned, and let's face it, I'm going to say all of us. I'm making that number up, so please don't like quote me and hit me on facts. But we all learned on residential fires first in the academy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's what we do. And most of us fight residential fires first. So our brain naturally has to go back into, hey, file, pre-connect, let's grab it and let's go. And so it kind of changes that up a little bit. But I definitely think, though, as a fire service, we've gotten much better. And I believe that, I mean, like your podcast alone, like this didn't exist.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have this, 20 years ago in the academy, like having somebody talk about fire and it's cool and like, hey, check these videos out and look at this. and I call it fire porn.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm an addict. I love fire porn. I'm looking at it all the time, and you're learning, and it goes. So on the building construction side, yeah, I'm going to sit there and say like I think we got the tactics. It's just the application we got to keep working on.
So would you say that modern lightweight is less of a boogeyman than it used to be? I feel like like in my short time in fire service, I feel like basically what I was told in the beginning was like if it was one of these lightweight houses, we don't go in. And I think that that's evolved now a little bit more. Would you say that we're more on the side of being less afraid of it than we were?
Absolutely, that's one thing I will say. So I love that you brought up just like that too, like the boogeyman, because I laugh. Like I love the firehouse lawyers when they come out, and it's like regardless if it's COVID or some other bullshit, the way people lose their minds. Um, Again, like I don't care. Like everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I do notice that when firemen don't know something 100%, they immediately click to the fear button on it, and like the avoidance or the it gets cast so far under the one side. I mean, I've seen this go through with, like the tactical EMS, and I mean, God, it's almost to the point of where it's disappointing. Where I've seen so many good guys make silly decisions based on fear instead of really sitting it out and thinking it through. Um, Lightweight is always going to be scary. It's designed to fail right away. But that's where the first question, though, I think now we're starting to ask ourselves is this room and contents or is this contents? Okay, it's room and contents. Is it load bearing structure room or is it just architectural type dividing room? All right, what's my time limit? Because here's the thing, too, we're pretty good. I got to say, like, especially in the suburbs, we can move inch and three quarter, especially in this area. I think better than just about anybody. Like,
Big
I'd put
open
us up against,
spaces, right?
we can move.
Yeah.
And I'm talking like guys are good. And now that we begin, I'm really starting to see that trend too, where that Kool-Aid's getting out with that nozzle and that coupling at the front door. That's giving you 50 feet of hose, 50 feet nozzle reach, 100 feet right away. I mean, whose houses like first still in? I mean, Barrington. I mean, you got to pack a
Sure.
lunch
We got
outside.
stuff, but yeah.
But but for your most bread and butter, is that 100 feet, 50 on the nozzle, 50 on the hose?
Yeah.
Man, you're talking 35, 40 seconds to water on fire.
Yeah.
Like we can get water on fire fast, but then that comes with the change in conditions of how are we reading this? And that's where I think sometimes the mistakes happen where guys on the lightweight side don't understand the flues, the chases. There is still balloon frame construction. It's just not balloon frame framing, but those vents, those chases, they still exist. Nothing's going away with that. And the only way we find that out is are we out there training when we're learning our streets? Did we see the house get built? But here's the problem I hate, and I've been trying to change by me, and I'm still failing. As stuff's getting built, I'm taking pictures of it for the pre-plans. So when you take a look at this, you see how it was built. And so now we have an understanding. This is truly lightweight. This is truss. This is stick. They have a good understanding. I have a roof in one of my, how do I say this? We'll just do lower income side. I think it'll be the easiest way, but it also has developmental disabilities with it, type group home, if you will. But the roof is basically built out of gypboard. It's gypsum board with a layer of shingles over it. It's not even wood. The
Wow.
sheets are basically around 250 pounds a piece, 4x8, and it's on 22 gauge lightweight steel architectural frame. No true rafters. It's a complete no go for a roof. I know this. All my guys know this, but my new guys probably don't.
Wow.
And so it's like, how do we do this? Well, we can talk about it. And we have a picture of it, but you know what? It would have been better off. And where I screwed up, I should have filmed it. I should have went through and made a video on it so the next generation see it. I didn't, and now I got to carry that. So it's like we got to keep educating. So I definitely don't think like that boogeyman exists. Like when you hear the term lightweight, but I do love the fact that it makes the hairs go up.
Yeah.
It's like one of those like, hey, there's a vicious dog in the backyard. We're still going,
Sure.
but maybe I'll bring my Halligan and a loaf of bread. We'll
Yeah.
try to bribe first, but we're going to work. It's one of those things that I do like, where I'm like, okay, it's good, but where I think that sometimes we definitely still need to make it a boogeyman is those towns that have tons of legacy construction still, because they're so used to, I've got all the time in the world. We want to make sure they know, hey, you're on the clock. And so when you hear that, maybe it is a boogeyman for you still for a little bit until you get a few more reps, a few more files in the old brain to fall back on that, hey, this isn't good. And, Thankfully, though, I think we're doing pretty good. I mean, we are moving in the right direction.
I agree. I do think that it's becoming less frightening, and I think that you're getting more educated people. So now people that don't understand it, that then get up and say it's going to kill you. Well, it's not necessarily going to kill you. You just have to understand it more. There's a guy on the West Coast named Rob Fisher, which I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's fucking top notch smart with roofs and building construction. And he spent time with, he works in Washington, I think, but just awesome. And if you ever get a chance to hear him talk about roof construction, it's pretty phenomenal. I haven't had him on my show or anything like that, but he's definitely out in the area. I don't think he's wrote anything. And it's interesting to hear his thoughts for sure on that. He basically says, like, when you look at guys that fall through roofs, it's through the sheathing. It's not through the rafters. And that's with modern lightweight construction. So I'm not him, so I'm not going to tell you all this stuff. But Josh Culper, I hope I pronounced that.
Yeah.
I'm horrible at them. He says that your pre-plans binder and that sweet van's legit. Standpipe Ops with his pre-plans, with your pre-plans are next level. So, yeah.
He's an awesome guy. He's too kind.
Um,
But that kind of goes back to that whole building construction thing, like that pre-fire I did, was how do I make it safer for the guys? Like, how do we do this? And one of the best things I did was, okay, that last EMS run, it was a diabetic, 213. Okay, that patient is my fire. That's the apartment unit. How do I get there? How many lengths of hose? And let's face it, like when we get these complex Texas wraps, like there's no more buildings that are built square. There's no more A, B, C, D. There's wings and there's this and it's that. How do we simplify it? Let's color it. Let's make it easy. Make sure our guys know, put them on the doors. And that's why I talk about these building codes. Change the building codes. I mean, half the time, like towns don't even know what we need. Get proactive. And I've been able to change quite a few where, hey, we require, you need to label every door. Done.
yeah.
And it's like, it's great. I mean, the next thing I'm working on for all the engineers out there, and guys, I'm telling you, get this thing passed. But when a fire alarm goes off, the strobe above your FDC needs to have a strobe light that automatically lights up the whole area. A big, nice LED illumination. How awesome would that be? And one of the best things, too, that we got passed, if you have an FDC, you have to have a hydrant within 50 feet of it.
Done. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, all those engineers right now are probably going like, yeah, let's do that. Let's move to Wheeling. Unfortunately, it's not all throughout the town.
Sure.
But those new changes, like, we can do that. We can control that. All the time people are like, hey, we need code changes or we need this. Right now, we have a little bit of power. Let's utilize it to make us safer because we're not going to get more people. We hire a new firefighter, a couple $100,000. Villages are like, no way, we don't want it. Okay, well, how can I make a high-rise lead out easier if I don't have an extra guy? Well, it's going to go back to the fact that we're getting screwed. But wait a minute. If I know exactly where I'm going, I know exactly how much hose I need. I can get it easily done with one guy doing the FTC. One guy can carry hose. One guy can. Now it's more manageable.
Yeah.
It's still not right. It's still it's still criminal. But if we can change the building codes to help us a little bit, why not?
Yeah.
And because the builders, they're saving money by taking shortcuts because buildings are sprinklered, et cetera, which makes our lives a little bit more dangerous for us, if you will, when these things fail. Well, let's start having them build some stuff into the system that makes it safer for us.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
once you start eliminating factors in making decisions, the decisions make themselves, right? If you can eliminate a lot of that stuff, then when you get to the real shit that you really have to think about, like you're not worried about all that other crap. You're right there, primed and ready to make a decision. So changing those little things is awesome. Yeah. Especially if it's just so common sense, like absolutely makes sense. Crazy shift again. You wanted to talk about foam, and I had a question for you because we're not pioneering anything. We made some cool connection, and I got to see it myself, and it's starting to kind of make its way in the area. But have you heard of Fire Rain?
So yes.
So I'm not sponsored by them by any means. I did get to meet those guys. They're from Canada, and they were pretty cool. And have you seen this gel stuff? And what do you think of it?
So right now, like I'm not a physicist. I'm not no chemist. I'm nothing on this, like by any means. But like to me, and I bring this back, and I'm gonna not ignore your question. I'll come back to it, but I want you to like understand like where I come with everything, and everything I base on is what's the mission. And I really mean this. So when all this stuff came out about PFAS and PFOSs and everything else, That's scary shit. Like I've had cancer. I don't want it back. It's terrible. Like shit my pants. Like you know how hard it is. It sucks shit in your own pants. I mean, hopefully you guys have never experienced it, but it's gross. And I'm like, man, like you don't want to go through this stuff, and you don't want anybody else to go through that. But then, unfortunately, what happened is it takes off into that fear, and that in like terrible decisions are being made based off fear, and no one's thinking it through. And my first thing, and I talked about it too, I'd argue with, I goes, what's the mission? And that's what I'm going to ask you. I go, what do you want to be done? So if I have a liquid flammable fuel fire, is the expectation for me to put it out or let it burn? That's what I'm asking. And if the expectation is to put it out for the three strategic priorities of life safety, incident mitigation, property conservation, then man, we got to put it out. So then you need to provide me the right stuff to put it out. And I'm like, cool. Well, the issue that came out is, PFAS, it's bad. Of course, I can go on this for hours. I teach like major classes on it. And I don't want to bore everybody with like foam, and they're out. But the thing I talk about is, all right, well, all the regulations that came out, the new military specs, and I can go into greater detail if you want, but it's designed for only hydrocarbon. That's it. Okay, no big deal. Most of the stuff we deal with is gasoline and that kind of stuff. So they made some pretty good, awesome, safe products out there. There's really only one that was approved with the military specs with the flashback and the burnback characteristics. And I solely recommend sticking with M spec. I truly believe that for our safety. Because there's a lot of foams out there. There's a lot of gels out there. The big water symposium that was held down in New Orleans, or Baton Rouge, excuse me, completely showed how many of these foams failed. I was at a hazmat conference where guys that were actually the nerds, they tested 14 of the top advertisers. So I got to be careful what I say because I'm not getting sued here. But they took the top 14 advertisers that's in fire engineering, firehouse, all their stuff saying, hey, look, we're PFAS free, we're PFO free. They ran it on a test, and Dawn dish soap smoked them all.
Wow.
So I really want like to think that through. When these guys said that, I was like, wow. And it got me thinking, I'm like, so I'm going to test, and we always tested our stuff because we have an airport. So we had to have foam. And my passion with foam goes way back to when like the engines, they kept breaking and they couldn't use it, trying to figure out why it wasn't working and things built up. But then I started going, okay, cool. Well, now we can get this new foam that's PFAS free, that passed the tests, that's doing great. It smoked everything. Yes, there's a lot of advertisements talking out there that they have it, but this is the one that was proven military grade, can make it work. Awesome. But I looked at it and I go, wait a minute, it's only for hydrocarbons. What about our ARs, our polar solvents? And that's what scared me. So then I go to my team, I go, do you have an expectation that on our 2 ethanol plants, when they light up and our distilleries light up, to put it out? What about our huge manufacturing that uses, your heptane and your isobutylol blends together for like your mold cleaning injections? These businesses employ thousands of people in town. This is tax base. This is revenue. Are you willing to write off these buildings? Well, no, you have to put it out. Well, if I'm going to put it out, I need an AR foam. There is no AR foam that has PFAS free that can pass the specs. I can put Dawn dish soap in there, and by the time it puts it out, the buildings, we saved the foundation. And so that's where I come to play. All my decisions are based on what is the expectation of the fire department. And it sucks because you know what I am? I'm asking guys to touch chemicals that probably aren't that safe. But compared to what's burning, breathing, et cetera, you start playing toxicity things and all that. I'm trying to avoid all that deep rabbit dive. But my main thing is that if you have an expectation that you're going to put my guys in harm's way to put out a fire, you damn well better make sure you gave them a tool that can do that. And so that's kind of where I'm at. So now I've seen some of these new products coming out. I haven't tested any of them.
Yeah, yeah.
I like what they're saying. I love what they're saying, but here's the problem I have. And the reason why I have nervousness about it is right now there's only one product that's been passed as far as I know. Again, I'm not a nerd scientist. The last time I checked was a couple of weeks ago. And again, no sponsorships, but it's a Solberg. They're doing great. The U.S. military already has to start purchasing this stuff for their ships. That's millions of dollars, billions of dollar contracts. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If all these other products are as good as it can meet that specs, they would be on there competing for that money. So I'm not saying the product's bad. I'm not saying the product may not be great, but I haven't seen those products officially used on fires. And I also then would question if they are this great, Why aren't they part of this multi-billion dollar, give me the
Yeah.
money sales pitch for the US government for every single warship, every single Navy base, air base? And then moving from there, it's got to move into what? Atlanta, Chicago, Midway,
Yeah.
New York. So I'm hesitant to jump on any bandwagon or purchase a bunch of stuff because it says it's PFAS free and it's AR and it's this, because I want to sit there and look at it. Yeah, so is Dawn dish soap. I can use Dawn dish soap. It will eventually work. But are you willing to risk any of your guys on Dawn dish soap? Because I'm not. And that's the thing I have when it comes to that foam thing. And I can go on, teaching a class at NIPSTA actually, I think what, next month, April sometime.
Yeah, on foam.
Find out.
Well, there you go.
But it's one of those things where I just we have to make sure that whenever we take that risk, that there's a reward that's good enough and that our guys are protected. Because
Yeah.
to put them in harm's way based on, oh God, we can't have this. It's got PFAS, so get this. Well, you know what? We know PFAS. It's foam. Don't lick it. Don't eat it. We'll be okay. Wash it off. Versus, hey, take this. It should put the fire out, but maybe it won't. And that's the only thing I have. So I'm all about, yeah, it sounds good. It sounds great, but I haven't seen it tested. And then the thing, too, I got to be careful of is I watched a couple of these companies and I felt bad because their salespeople came out. They talked. I had a couple other towns calling me on it because they know I'm intimate with foam. And I was like, look at their own webpage. Their own webpage is showing a 4x8 pan, just 4x8. That's a sheet of plywood. And they couldn't put it out for almost 9 minutes. So I'm like, okay. And then like, oh, but look at this one. We got this one out in 3 minutes. It was like 3 minutes and 46 seconds. It was a 2x4 pan. And I'm like, okay, but I need to make a rescue corridor. Like if we got, and I forget the plane crash. I mean, most people don't deal with that stuff.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
how many of us have simple? I mean, let's break it down to a simple tender or tanker truck, semi, saddle. You got to do an extrication. We got to put foam on the ground to protect our guys. It's a 10x10 area, and they can't even do it. Or they think they have a blanket, guys are working, and then you get the flare up, and now we're sending hopefully nobody to the morgue, but at least a bunch of guys to the hospital with flash burns, maybe inhalation burns. So that's just where I'm at with that, where I do love it. Don't get me wrong. I want every product coming out. I want to test everything and let's really see what we can do to keep our people safe, because the ultimate goal is to have an AFFF, if you will, /AR foam that's PFAS free.
Sure. Yeah.
The other problem too, though, we talk about, remember how we learned how to spray foam?
Yeah.
Those ways don't work no more. This new foam doesn't have that bonding. So the other problem too is you can even have the right foam, but if we can't get out there and train with it, guys they're not going to be safe either. So that is the one thing I think that in terms of challenges in the fire service coming up, I do believe that's going to be a big one where guys are going to have to relearn an application of foam that we never learned before. Like, remember how long it took us as a fire service to, like, you don't put water on smoke. You don't put water on smoke.
Yeah.
Now
Now
everybody needs to put water on smoke.
Yeah. Yeah.
That took, I think, 10, maybe 12 years. I think this will do the same thing, but maybe longer because foam is a very rare topic in the fire service.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of, I'm very ignorant to it for sure. Like, we never put foam on anything. They always joked because it was so expensive. But, like, I think I've put foam in my career total on a garbage truck fire and maybe one other car fire. And that was it. And it was just because the lieutenant went, we got the foam on the rig. Why don't we throw that in there? Right, we'll give it a shot. But the reason I brought up, so I, again, don't really know much about foam outside of, that. But this other stuff that we saw is a gel. It's not even a foam. And it was interesting. I'd never seen anything like that. Like, it basically just sticks to all this stuff and makes it fire resistant, but I have no idea. And obviously, I mean, you know way more about foam, and I was curious if you had dug into that particular one, because I know it was making its way around our county because they did 2 or 3 drills where they had a box and they lit it on fire and all that stuff. And actually, we still have the wood at our station because they did it at our station, and that stuff is still stuck to the wood. Because we use it to make a hallway that we do hose advancement through. And I'm still scraping it off the side of that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe another time maybe we could talk more foam, because I don't really know anything about foam. And maybe you come back on and we can talk foam, or like your class. I mean,
I don't want your ratings to plummet. You start talking foam, everybody's
Dude,
out.
Come on,
no,
you're fine.
The class, yeah, no, it'll be a good time.
But yeah, I don't know. There's there's some, and then with PFAS and all that, and nobody knew anything about that stuff, and now all of a sudden, there's so much information about
Oh,
that.
it's crazy.
It's a whirlwind how everything's changed, and we're paying
And that's
attention to that stuff.
the biggest thing is like I try to tell people like, you got to take a second. You just got to take a second and breathe and look at it. Like you guys remember the rollerblades? Everybody remembers rollerblades, right? The problem is they weren't rollerblades. They were inline skates. Rollerblade was a company that made inline skates, but there was 17, 18 different manufacturers of inline skates, but we all called them rollerblades. Well, the problem is that PFOS banner covers all these other PFASs and these short chains and everything else. So next thing you know, when they did this worldwide ban, because everybody jumped on it, they freaked out. Everybody forgot that that new C6, that short chain PFA molecule breakdown, is nowhere near in the same league of toxicity as the PFOs. And so that's the stuff in most of our foams. And so like they're all screaming about how this stuff's going to be the end of the world. That stuff wasn't even in our foam, but it fell under that banner of that rollerblade, if you will.
Yeah.
And so many people jumped on it, and then it becomes into this major issue. And then it's in our gear, and it's in this, and it's in that. And it, like, so many wasted man hours happened, I think, even between unions and management of just, we got to protect our guys, and like, and all this craziness where somebody just would have done the, hey, time out a second. Let's actually get a chemist. Let's get some people, not, Los Angeles News article and this and that, and let's look at what they're really saying. I think we could have made some smarter decisions, saved a lot of money, and maybe even done a better job of keeping our people safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Leonhardt's in here, and he says that we used to train with foam because we needed to get rid of it before it wasn't any good. And he's right. That was what we did. We were like, oh man, it's all gonna expire. We better squirt this on some gasoline or something.
Absolutely, that is so true.
Yeah, but
That is crazy.
it is interesting. Like everyone, we're people of action. That's the fire service, right? So like when we see this coming, and now you combine like liability and everything. Like everybody wants to talk about liability all the friggin' time. And so now it's like, well, I don't want to be the one with the information that we had this and this, and now in 10 years everyone's going to sue me. So we better do something about it. And like we overcorrect, and now everything starts to level out and we figure it out. We're horrible at that in this job for some reason. We overcorrect everything. It's hysterical, but I guess that's what we are because we're people of action. So
Got it.
it's better to be that than passive. I don't know, but
Absolutely.
so are you ready for the five? I can't brand it because I'm stealing from the weekly scrap if I brand it. So I'm not going to. But there's 5 closing questions, and
All right, what do you got?
we'll go through those. Thank you again for all the fun stuff in the middle here, and anybody that's watching, because you got 9 live viewers right now, which is pretty very good for me.
I paid them.
At least in
I
the
paid
live
them.
area. If you guys got questions for Jim, throw them in there, and I'll work them in to the end here. But we're gonna roll into these last like 5 closing questions. So. We've all made plenty of mistakes over the course of our career, and I know you from taking classes. I know that you wear that stuff on your sleeve, and you're very good about sharing them. So, what's one like really significant mistake that you've made in your career and that you've learned from?
Man, like you talk, I got 20 billion. You'd have showed to 2,000 like episodes of just
I
my
know
like
it's an unfair question because I'm in the same boat, but like, what's one just that
God,
really like?
you know what I think it is? It's not even a specific, but it's a generalization that I have judged people on their actions, and I have always wanted to be judged on my intentions. And I think that is probably the biggest mistake I have made in my career, where I looked at people thinking they're thinking like me, and I judged them on what they did and not on what their intention was to do. And I think I burned a lot of bridges and lost friends even at times because I'm holding them to a standard that isn't even obtainable. And the problem is, though, is they already met that standard and went even further because their intention was to always do the right thing. And I think honestly, that is probably my biggest regret in life. Where if I could go back in the fire service, I would really truly like to have judged everybody on their intentions and not on their actions. And it's one of those things where I take a look at it, I'm like, man, like we've all had shitty days. Like I mean, we've all had shitty moments in every day that we've ever lived. And some of us have had actually shitty days. And it's like, God damn it, Jim. Like, did you take 2 seconds and ask them why? And then did you ask yourself, what did you do that enabled that even to happen? Like, yeah, they made a mistake, but what was your role in that mistake? And then what was their intention? And it's like, man, you're a fucking asshole. Like, you're judging this guy because he didn't do this right, but his intention was to do it right. He wanted to do it right, and you didn't even provide him the ability to do it right. And that's it, man. I'd say, like, I mean, if you want some specifics to laugh your ass off and make fun of me, I can come up with a couple, but I think that's actually like the biggest thing I wish I could change.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. Seriously. Yeah. Um, I know you've mentioned a ton of people over the course of our talk here, and usually I ask people this question because I think it gives them an opportunity to highlight someone that maybe they didn't get an opportunity to highlight. But you make no bones about people that have been influential on you, which is fantastic and it's awesome. So I know it's going to be hard to pick one, but and it doesn't necessarily have to be one, but I'll just ask the question as what it is. So, someone that influenced you the most earlier on in your career.
Yeah, like everybody, you know what I mean? And I'm with you on it. Like obviously, I think like my first like real often, Lieutenant like Joe DePaul, like he was like he started, but like I mean, like, even Chris Riley, who's actually one of my lieutenants now, he's my preceptor. Like he's like, no, we learn, we do. Like Cliff Gardner, I mean, taking classes with that guy, holy shit. I mean, that's a god amongst gods. I mean, you're talking Zeus, like, it's nuts. But like, and it's funny how you say like early on, but like I still think I'm learning.
Yeah.
I mean, even today, like I sat there with guys that every single one of them, I mean, influenced me. I mean, like Cat Pete mentioned, he's up in Northbrook. I mean, from Kofo, like that dude is like, you're gonna tell me that guy doesn't put 100% in? I'll fight you. I'll throw hands. Like, I'm sitting there, I'm like Captain Swanson, like Run Academy, like sitting there at graduate, like that, like he cares. And I mean, I look at people like Captain Truesdale, like like Scott XO, like Mike Brock, like I can go on for hours. I mean, like even like it's funny. I mean, like everybody influences you, and like when you sit there and say like who influences you the most, I don't even know if that's the right way to say it because like there can be a guy that might influence you to kind of turn your life around, but sometimes it's that smallest little influence too that doesn't seem great that might make the most impact with everybody else. Like Chief Brock influenced me to say good morning to everybody. And as stupid as that is, I've had people come up and say, "Hey man, you made my day better because you just said good morning to me." And it's like of all the knowledge that man put on me that's helped me on fires and savings, maybe that is actually the biggest impact. So I mean, put it this way, I could literally take up probably 8 hours just talking about people that have made my world a better place, like that have reached out. And like, I'm gonna feel terrible because like when I'm done talking to you, I'm gonna be like, I didn't talk about this guy, and I didn't
Yep.
say that guy, and oh my god, and it's gonna be one of those things. But I mean, like, even Josh, like the guy that wrote in, like that dude was awesome. I met him in Monroe, Wisconsin. I don't know if he felt sorry for me because I was like the fat dumb kid or whatever, but he's like, "Come on, Jimmy, we like to party over here, and we're doing flashover training." Like it was awesome. And like that guy influenced me. Like he literally, that guy right there alone, the L Slick Memorial Training. I have picked up probably 30 good points that I've brought back to people and taught and let's face it, stole and like shared with other people because of that guy right there, because of a legend that I knew that he introduced me to. He was the guy that introduced me to L Slick. And then L Slick was my hazmat boss for a while. And like it's just nuts like how it's cool. Like Cap says, like we're the world's biggest gang, and like we all interact, we all hang out with one another. And I always joke like when I'm on a construction site, like the plumbers start thinking they're badasses or something. I'd be like, "Fuck you! You got a problem? How long is it gonna take you to get 30 plumbers here? Like 9 days? Give me 3 minutes. Give me 3 minutes, and I'll have 200 people here. Like keep talking shit. Um, but it's one of those things. So yeah, I mean, early on, it would have to probably be like DePong and then like Cliff Gardner, Riley, like guys that, they gave a shit. But that's the cool thing though, is I mean, for the most part, everybody still gives a shit. Some different levels, but yeah. Sorry I wasn't more specific
No,
for you,
you're
man.
fine. They're just guides. That's all it is to spark thoughts. You don't have to. It's not like I'm writing a paper. You
Oh,
know,
thank God.
I don't
Good
need.
on me, man. That's
Well,
a big vacuum.
that's how this started. Was I was thinking about writing a book, and then I was like, no, this is too much fun just to talk. And I mean, you should see the way I take notes. Like my handwriting's terrible, so
Oh,
I'm like, well, we'll just have fun with it and listen. Um, did you ever lose your passion for the fire service? And then what'd you do to get it back if you did? And then what keeps you locked into the job?
oh man. So yeah, it's embarrassing to admit it, but yeah, I have a couple times where I let the noise get in the way. Like I sat there and I was frustrated because like people didn't think like me. Not everybody drinks the same Kool-Aid. And it sucked. And I was like, man, I spent all this time like, and like I said, a lot of time outside the regular 40-hour job, or 52 hours, like checking shit out left and right, going everywhere, and doing like a million classes. And I lost some family time from that, but it was part of that too, though. Like I can't be the guy that loses somebody. And then I reached a point where all of a sudden I kind of looked around like, man, I don't got no friends. Like I got some really great colleagues, and I got some guys that, if I needed something, they'd all drop a hat and help me. But like actual those meaningful relationships. So like when my mom died, I watched who was there for my dad, and there's only one or two firemen, but he had those one or two firemen. And I'm like, man, like who do I got that's really my friend? Like, and it got kind of like, man, all this time you sacrifice, and at the end of the day, what is left? And like, it's funny, I bring them up again, like Pete mentioned, I was like, but it's those relationships. Like if you've got that one or two, and I was like, man, I don't really have it because I don't have those guys that drink the same Kool-Aid. And part of that too is life. Like I came into the fire service married with two kids. I had three more kids. One with special needs, almost lost one. A lot of tragedies in my life, things happening. So you're different from other people too. And it was like, oh, nah, I don't drink. I don't part like, how things go. You
Yeah.
just go apart. I don't understand team sports. Like I'm dumb as shit. And it was one of those things where I kind of was like, man, like, dude, my life's sad. And like, you kind of lose it. Like, what did I give all this for? And then I was like, that ain't no quitter. Like, stop being a little bitch. Like, like you gotta get that inside. And then I meet somebody, and I take a class, and then you meet another guy, and then you start realizing, like, hey, just because the exact people you might work every day with don't drink the same Kool-Aid, they're not bad people. They're the same as you. They're awesome. You're awesome. Like everybody's good. Keep kicking ass. But you will find people that drink the same Kool-Aid as you. They may not be in the same department, but they might be the town next over. They might be, and all of a sudden I'm meeting guys that drink the same Kool-Aid. I'm getting pumped again. I'm getting motivated. And then the people that I thought were so much different than me really aren't. They just sometimes look at, they may say six and I'm saying half dozen. We're still getting six, you know what I mean? And then that started to build up and help. And then it was really cool when I started truly selling like what I want to do and change, like in the fire service. And guys started seeing that and they're like, hey, okay, we're going to give you a chance, Jimmy. Like I told you, I hate busy work. My number one priority when I got promoted was getting rid of busy work, getting rid of stupid rig checks and solidifying and like making things simple. And the guys started drinking that Kool-Aid. And then they allowed me to maybe push some stuff that never would have gotten away with before. But they're like, fuck yeah, we'll do a couple extra reps of training because we're not doing this stupid shit. And next thing you know, like it built up again. And all of a sudden, I found a couple good relationships. I got some people that I can truly consider family that are like, they're family. And I suddenly realized too that everybody else, even the people you disagree with, they're not bad people. Like we just get it, just different ways of looking at things, but we're all got the mission on our mind. And it kind of reinvigorated me. And then honestly, teaching the new kids at the academy level. Like I didn't think I would like that because I'd just be like, man, like sometimes I'm like, what the fuck? Like, please, like Greg Swanson says the best, like, please don't lick the window. Don't lick the window. And then all of a sudden you turn around, they're like, like I said, don't lick the window. I wasn't. And you're like, your slime's on the window. Like that's the Swanson thing, perfect. But I love it because like today at graduation, I watched 31 kids who literally came into the fire service knowing nothing walk out and they're going to go to their departments with some kind of skill because they give a shit and we gave a shit. And it's awesome. And it's like at the end of the day, I have those few relationships that I wanted. I got those really good friends, but I also got a couple hundred people out there that are like, hey, Jimmy Theobald, he's a dick or he's a dick, great guy, asshole, whatever. But he taught me some stuff. and the world's a better place. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, and it's no shot at any other profession in the world that we do. But at least as a firefighter, whether it's your worst firefighter or your best firefighter, somewhere on this planet, they made somebody's life better. And you can't always say that about every job out there. And I think that's what's cool. And that kind of reinvigorated me to be, I'm like, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, we're winning. And so I thought that was cool. So that's kind of what got me around. But I was a little whiny little butt for a little bit there. I would say I was kind
Yeah.
of, but all good now.
Awesome. Yeah. Uh, man, I guess I gotta get rid of some of these one person. But all right. So this question, it could be anyone in the history of the fire service, alive or dead, doesn't matter, whether you know them or not. So you're gonna take one of those kids who knows nothing about the fire service, right? Or a public official, right? And you want to give them a sense of what we really are as firefighters. And you're gonna put them with one person to show them this is what it's like and give them the tour, if you will. Who's it gonna be?
Mike Bronk, Chief Mike Bronk. He's a Northman retired battalion chief. I think he retired with like 40 some years, like 40 call. Like he's like 47 years in the fire service without a doubt. Like he was mandatory to out. I'm gonna say that guy. Cause like nobody says anything bad about Bronk for a reason. Not because we'll beat their ass, but because there's nothing to say bad about Bronk. Like that's just the way it is. Like I actually joked around because he does a really good presentation for the kids. And it's like one of those things where I'm trying to tell the kids, like, you don't know what you have here yet. Like when you get some experience, you're gonna realize, holy shit, I sat in a lecture from Mike Bronk, like holy football, like this man gave me wisdom and he doesn't even realize it. Like 'cause sometimes these kids are like drowning in that like world of knowledge, but they're starving for wisdom.
Yeah,
Like Bronk was giving them the wisdom. But I literally said this running joke. How long should a 360 on a residential house in your neighborhood take? 30 seconds to a minute. If you go with Bronco, it's 45 minutes because every single firefighter is going to drop what they are doing to come run over there, give that man a hug, and ask him how he's doing, how life is, everything else. Like that is the equivalent of you want to know. Like Bronco brings 6 fucking sandwiches every day to Nipsta in case somebody doesn't have a lunch. And I'm like doing the math, like how much that must cost them in cold cuts. Like it's hysterical to the point where like the other instructors have overdosed on cold cut sandwiches because like we end up eating them. And it's hilariously great. But it's I would say it's him because when you look at that guy, it's service. It's all about service. It's who he is 100%, whether he's working like at the church or he's doing something here, there. And the familyness, the tightness, the bonding, the laughter, the jokes, it's great. And I would say it's probably going to be him on that side of things. And like I would say also like an honorable mention would be Chief Hoff from the city retired. I don't really know him very well. I've taken a few classes with him. Like he might recognize my face, or maybe not even that. But I just took a Rid Under Fire Chief class not that long ago. Gary Coney put it together. That guy's awesome. I mean, just solid
yeah,
people. But the craziest thing is, they're talking, and I mean, like Uncle Mike's there, and like that guy is in my ear, fucking wisdom and knowledge, and talk about experience, wisdom. Like I can just talk about these guys forever, just how kind they were to me to take me into their fold and teach me stuff. But I watched it where we were going from one building to the other, and I literally watched Chief Huff. Chief Huff, the guy has nothing to prove to nobody, done it, been there 1,000 times over. I watched him load a car for a lady that was struggling with some boxes as we were walking up. And I'm like, that dude is service. And nobody saw it. He doesn't even know we saw him. But that is what I'm talking about. Like, that's like a Bronco. Like, you talk, even in the biggest, I was just number two, I think, New York one, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm
yeah,
going to be partial because I'm close to them.
yeah.
I love those guys. But that guy there, the biggest city versus North Main, which is very small, but those two guys, Chief Bronx, wow. So that's what I'm going to say. Like,
Yeah.
if I got to show somebody, like, I would kill. I don't. Maybe I would kill. There's a few people, but to ever be looked at like those guys are looked at, like for 1 second, like that kind of just coolness.
Yeah.
It just that's the job. Plus they both got badass mustaches I could never grow in a million years.
Uh,
But you get what I'm saying? It's just awesome. So I would say those two guys.
there's video evidence of my lack of mustache. I don't remember which episode number, but someone could probably find those. Yeah, dude, and we've got to talk about Rid Under. So my Rid Under Fire experience was the first time they did the Chiefs as a part of Rid Under
Oh,
Fire.
yeah.
So we've got to next time we connect, we've got to talk about that because it was unreal and love
Awesome.
that class. I wish I could go. I hope I go again sometime in my life. I want to,
Oh,
but
definitely. That's good.
um, cool. Yeah, and those two, I'm with you all day. Yeah. Best part of the job.
I think, oh God, that's like terrible because it's like you put me on the spot here. Um, Selfishly and unselfishly. So selfishly, the guys. I get paid to literally get made fun of and make fun of one another, be big kids, be part of stupid pranks, just watch. I'll tell you, one of my favorite memories was me walking down the stairs coming into the kitchen area from my office and watching a plate of refried beans go flying across the kitchen and hit one of the guys where I had to turn around real quick and run back upstairs so I could have plausible deniability. Like that kind of like the laughter where it hurts, like you get cramps for days, and like that only comes from the guys. Like that is unbelievably the best part. Selfishly, I would say that's it. But I think overall the best part is you actually make a difference. And as silly as it sounds, even the people that abuse the ambulance calls, the bullshit trouble alarms, the whatever it is, every time you get in that rig and you drive down the street, you've got every little kid looking at you, being like, they're gonna go do some hero shit. Like that's cool. And even half the time it's not. It's the dumbest shit we go on. But and I call like that fire tax. Like, we run 1,000 dumb calls for one cool call, whatever your tax is. But still, every time you do something, we make the world a better place. And even if it's just giving some people some hope, like, hey, if I'm in trouble, I got someone I can call. And like I've been overseas. I've been overseas a lot. And there's places you call for an ambulance, you're waiting hours. Like there is no help coming. People and I'm like, man, like how cool is it that if you really think about it, you could be choking, call 911 and get help before you pass out. Like that's insane when we think about it. Like they got the geo tracking, they got all this stuff to do. You don't even gotta say I'm choking because you can't. Like, and so I just think that's probably the coolest part of the job. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not want to diss on anybody else, but like, I mean, really, like the guy that made the chair I'm sitting in, can he really say that? Like, he's like, well, I gave you a place to sit. Like, it's just cool. And I mean, there's something really cool about it. And then you get to hang out with people who are just awesome. Like every office, yeah, don't get me wrong, every firehouse, they got a dick here and, asshead there and a complainer here. But really, for the most part, we got it made. We work with awesome people, all walks of life, where you can go into a lot of other workplaces and be like, oh God, sitting at a cubicle, just counting the minutes away, wishing your life away.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with those. I'm gonna say those two things: hanging out with the guys and just making a difference.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, cool. That's it.
All right.
That's 32 episodes here. I mean, that was a great one. I appreciate you coming on, man. I hope we could do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll
Thank
have
you
to.
so much. It really means a lot that you'd even think of asking me
Yeah.
because I'm definitely an idiot, but I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
Hey, I learned two phrases many phrases, but two phrases from you: knuckle dragger and booger eater. So we can
Yeah.
we can touch on those again. Ones that I used all the time now. I keep
Oh,
making fun of the hazmat guys at work. Not but it's always
oh yeah.
a poke in and a poke back. But yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for coming on and hang out for a second. Then I'm gonna end the live stream and then we'll go from there. So thank you everyone if you
All
were
right. Thank you,
listening.
Ken.
Thanks for the live viewership, and we'll see you guys in the next one. So take it easy.